The skies of Xylos burned, not with the warmth of their twin suns, but with the smoldering wreckage of once proud Lythari vessels scattered across the stratosphere like broken toys. From her command center deep beneath the surface of the capital city, Commander Alara Voss watched the tactical displays with hollow eyes. Another defense satellite lost. Another shield generator overloaded. Another city falling. Status report, she said, her voice carrying none of the exhaustion that weighed on her slender frame. The silver patterns etched into her blue skin, once luminous symbols of her military rank, had dulled over years of constant warfare. Northern Hemisphere defenses at 12% capacity, Commander, replied her tactical officer, a young Lythari, whose facial markings were barely finished forming. Southern continent has gone dark. The Kthrak have landed ground forces near the Meridian Archives. Alara's jaw tightened. The archives contained what remained of their civilization's knowledge, scientific discoveries, artistic achievements, historical records spanning millennia. Soon it would all be dust, like everything else the Kthrak touched. And the evacuation ships? She already knew the answer. The last transport was intercepted at the outer marker. No survivors. Around the command center, the remaining officers maintained their discipline, but Alara saw the truth in their postures, the slight slump of shoulders, the trembling hands quickly steadied. Hope was a luxury none of them could afford anymore. 7 years of unrelenting warfare had reduced the Lythari population from billions to mere millions. Their once gleaming cities of crystalline spires now stood as jagged ruins under a sky perpetually darkened by smoke and debris. The door to the command center slid open with a hiss. Elder Talon, the last surviving member of the Lythari High Council, entered slowly. His once imposing height was now bent with age and burden. The luminous patterns covering his face and hands faded to almost nothing. "The council chamber has been sealed," he announced, his voice brittle. "I'm all that remains." No one spoke. There was nothing to say. The Lythari governing body, once composed of 200 of their wisest minds, had been systematically eliminated, some in battle, others to disease as the Kthrak unleashed biological agents, and many to simple despair. "Commander Voss," Elder Talon said, approaching Alara's station. "Walk with me." They moved to a private alcove away from the others. Through a small viewport, Alara could see the ruined landscape of what had once been the capital's central plaza. Magnificent gardens and reflection pools replaced by craters and emergency field hospitals. In the distance, the silhouette of a Kthrak dreadnought loomed against the smoky orange sunset, its insectoid design a nightmarish presence that never left the skies. "We have one option left," Talon said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "One that the council has debated until there was no one left to debate." He handed her a small data crystal. Ancient technology, chosen deliberately because the Kthrak couldn't easily intercept it. "What is this?" Alara asked, turning the crystal in her palm. "Coordinates. Contact protocols. Everything we know about humans." Alara stared at him. "Humans? The theoretical species from the isolated system? They're just stories, myths from the old star charts." Talon shook his head. "Not myths. 3 centuries ago, one of our deep space exploration vessels encountered their signals. We've been observing from a distance ever since. They're real, and they're different. Different how? They evolved on a death world, high gravity, extreme weather patterns, dangerous fauna. Their physical form seems fragile, but they're remarkably adaptable. And their technological development has been unusual." Alara's tactical mind immediately began calculating. Do they have weapons that could match the Kthrak? Ships? Numbers? We don't know. They've never engaged in interstellar warfare. They've barely left their home system. But they've advanced rapidly in unexpected ways. And they might be our only hope. Alara closed her fingers around the crystal. The Kthrak have wiped out every advanced species that stood against them for the past 50 years. What could these isolated humans possibly do that the combined forces of 7 systems couldn't? Elder Talon's expression darkened. Nothing, perhaps. But we have nothing left to lose. A distant explosion shook the command center, causing dust to filter down from the ceiling. The lights flickered momentarily. They've breached the outer perimeter, reported the tactical officer, panic edging into his voice. Estimate 3 days before they reach the command bunker. Alara met Talon's gaze. 3 days until extinction. Even if these humans exist, she said quietly, even if they wanted to help, they couldn't reach us in time. The crystal contains coordinates for our long-range communication array on Lystrom Moon, Talon explained. It's our most powerful transmitter, and it remains hidden from the Kthrak. If you can reach it, you might establish contact. And then what? Beg strangers for help? Yes, Talon said simply. That is exactly what you must do. Alara looked around the command center at her remaining crew, exhausted, wounded, but still at their posts. She thought of her family, all dead now. Her home city, reduced to radioactive glass in the first year of the war. Everything and everyone she had ever fought for was gone, or soon would be. Prepare a stealth transport, she ordered her second-in-command. Small crew, minimal signature. We leave for Lystra in 1 hour. The journey to Lystrom Moon was harrowing. Twice they nearly collided with drifting debris from destroyed ships. Once they powered down completely as a Kthrak patrol vessel passed within kilometers of their position. But 6 hours later, they docked at the abandoned communication station built into a crater on the dark side of the small, barren moon. The facility was cold and powered down to avoid detection, its systems maintained only by autonomous repair drones. It took Alara's engineering officer nearly an hour to bring the main transmitter online, and even then, they kept power levels minimal, enough to send their message across the vast distance to the coordinates provided, but hopefully not enough to alert nearby Kthrak sensors. Message configured according to the translation protocols in the Crystal Commander, the communications officer reported. But we have no way of knowing if they'll understand it, or even if they're listening. Send it, Alara ordered, her voice firm despite the doubts churning inside her. And be ready to transmit visual once we establish contact. The wait seemed interminable. Minutes stretched into hours. The small crew huddled in the dimly lit communication hub, the only sound the soft hum of equipment and the occasional ping as their systems continued broadcasting the carefully crafted message. A distress call, a plea for help, and basic information about the Kthrak threat. Alara was considering shutting down the transmission. Their power reserves were dwindling, and remaining in one place for too long was dangerous when the communication array emitted a series of tones. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer exclaimed, frantically adjusting controls. It's not in any standard format." A moment later, a voice filled the room, clear, measured, speaking words in an unfamiliar language. The translation matrix struggled momentarily before converting it to comprehensible speech. "This is Ambassador Jian Li of the United Earth Government. We are receiving your distress call. Please identify yourself and the nature of your emergency." The entire crew froze, staring at the speaker as if it had produced magic. After 7 years of unrelenting loss, the simple sound of an unknown voice responding to their call seemed impossible. With trembling fingers, the communications officer activated their visual feed. A moment later, a holographic image materialized in the center of the room. A human, sitting at what appeared to be a desk in a brightly lit, orderly office. The being was smaller than a Lythari, with brown skin, dark hair, and facial features that seemed remarkably expressive despite their alienness. The human wore simple but precisely tailored clothing without ornament or rank insignia that Alara could recognize. "I am Commander Alara Voss of the Lythari Defense Force," she said, stepping forward so that her own image would transmit clearly. "Our civilization is under attack by a hostile force known as the Kthrak Empire. We are facing extinction within days. We request immediate assistance." The human, Ambassador Li, showed no visible reaction to her desperate words. No shock, no sympathy, no dismissal. Instead, there was a calm intensity to their gaze as they studied Alara, through the transmission. Please provide details of the conflict, Commander Voss. Lee requested, their tone businesslike. Duration, enemy capabilities, your current strategic position, and immediate threats. Be specific. The directness caught Ilera off guard. In Lythari culture, such a straightforward approach would be considered tactless at best, offensive at worst. But time was precious, and she quickly adapted. The Kthrak began their assault on our star system 7 standard years ago, she explained, gesturing for her tactical officer to transmit relevant data. They are a biomechanical insectoid species focused on territorial expansion and resource acquisition. Their technology exceeds ours, particularly in weapons systems, shield generation, and FTL capabilities. Their forces outnumber ours by approximately 20 to 1. Ambassador Lee's eyes briefly shifted to something. Off-screen, presumably reviewing the data being transmitted. Their expression remained neutral, but Ilera noticed a slight narrowing of eyes, a subtle tell of interest or concern. And what do the Kthrak want from your people? Lee asked. Our world contains large deposits of crystalline novolith, a rare element that can stabilize artificial wormholes. We believe they initially wanted to harvest it, but now... Ilera swallowed hard. Now, they simply want to eradicate us. They've deployed biological weapons against civilian centers, systematically destroyed cultural sites, and blocked all evacuation attempts. This is not conquest. It is extermination. Lee nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. And why have you contacted Earth specifically? Our civilization has not made its presence widely known in your region of space. This was the question Ilera had been dreading. How to explain that they were reaching out to an essentially unknown species based on ancient observations and desperate hope. We have limited intelligence suggesting that human technological development has followed unconventional paths, she said carefully. Our council believed you might possess capabilities that could help us, even if your civilization hasn't established a galactic presence. I see. For the first time, a faint smile crossed Lee's face. And what do the Lythari offer in return for this intervention? The question hung in the sterile air of the communication center. Ilera felt a flash of anger. Were they haggling while her people died? But she understood the calculation behind the question. No species would risk itself for strangers without reason. We have little left to offer, she admitted. Knowledge, perhaps. Access to novolith deposits, if we survive. Alliance with a grateful people. She hesitated, then added with quiet dignity. And the prevention of a precedent. If the Kthrak succeed in eliminating us, they will continue their expansion. No system will be safe. Ambassador Lee was silent for a long moment, studying Ilera with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Then they nodded again. I need to consult with our leadership. This transmission will remain open. Please stand by. The image of Lee froze, then disappeared, replaced by a simple geometric symbol that pulsed gently against a dark background. Are they gone? Asked Ilera's second-in-command, his voice strained with tension. No, Ilera replied, staring at the pulsing symbol. They're thinking. For nearly an hour, the Lythari crew waited in tense silence. Occasionally, the system would chime as new data requests came through, specific details about Kthrak's ship configurations, planetary defenses, civilian population centers. Ilera's team provided everything they could, increasingly bewildered by the specificity of the inquiries. Finally, Ambassador Lee reappeared. Their posture had changed subtly, more formal, shoulders squared. Commander Voss, I have been authorized to inform you that Earth will intervene in this conflict. A ripple of disbelieving murmurs spread through the small crew. Ilera herself felt lightheaded. Hope was a painful sensation after so long without it. When? She asked, unable to keep the urgency from her voice. Our planetary defenses will fail within days. The evacuation of our remaining population. Earth forces will arrive within 12 hours, Lee interrupted calmly. The situation will be resolved shortly thereafter. Ilera stared at the human's image in confusion. That's impossible. Even at maximum FTL speeds, the distance between our systems would require Our methods of transit differ from those common in your region, Lee explained, with what might have been a trace of pride. We will arrive as stated and neutralize the Kthrak threat. Please transmit the current positions of all civilian populations and your remaining military assets so we can avoid collateral damage. Are you suggesting, Alara said slowly, trying to process the implications, that you can defeat the entire Kthrak invasion force? Their fleet includes over 200 capital ships, thousands of fighters, and ground forces on 3 continents. The human's expression softened slightly. Commander, I understand your skepticism. But yes, that is exactly what I am suggesting. Please ensure your forces maintain defensive positions only when we arrive. Any aggressive action might confuse our targeting systems. Lee paused, then added, "This will be over quickly. You have my word." The transmission ended before Alara could respond. The journey back to the Xylo's command bunker was conducted in stunned silence. No one quite believed what they had heard, yet no one dared voice their doubts aloud. Hope was too fragile, too precious to challenge with skepticism. Upon their return, Alara immediately briefed Elder Talon and her remaining command staff. The reactions ranged from desperate relief to outright disbelief. 12 hours to travel between. Star Systems. General Kirix, her most experienced fleet commander, scoffed. And then what? They wave a magic wand and 200 Kthrak warships disappear? With respect, Commander, these humans are either delusional or lying. Why would they lie? Countered Talon. What could they possibly gain from giving us false hope at this stage? Perhaps they're scavengers, suggested another officer. They wait until civilizations are on the brink, promise rescue, then arrive to pick over the remains after the end. We've transmitted our defensive positions and civilian concentrations, Alara reminded them grimly. If their intentions are hostile, we've just made their task easier. The debate continued, but in the end, they had no choice but to wait and see. Orders were distributed to all remaining Lythari forces. Maintain defensive positions only, avoid engagement unless directly attacked, and prepare for the arrival of an allied species. Hours passed. The Kthrak continued their advance, methodically destroying outlying defenses as they tightened their grip around the final Lythari strongholds. Twice, Alara almost gave the order to launch desperate counterattacks, and twice she held back, remembering the strange confidence in Ambassador Lee's voice. 11 hours after the transmission, everything changed. It began with anomalous energy readings at the edge of the system, fluctuations unlike anything their sensors had detected before. At first, Alara thought it might be another Kthrak weapon being deployed. Then the readings multiplied, appearing at strategic points throughout the system. "What are we seeing?" she demanded, staring at the tactical display where hundreds of unknown signatures were suddenly appearing. I don't know, Commander," stammered the sensor officer. "They're not using any recognizable form of FTL travel. It's as if they're folding space somehow, opening thousands of small apertures rather than conventional jump points." Across the system, the Kthrak forces reacted to the new arrivals with predictable aggression, diverting from their attack patterns to address the unknown threat. A massive Kthrak dreadnought, easily 5 kilometers long, oriented toward one cluster of human signatures and fired its main cannon, a weapon that could reduce a city to ash. The beam of destructive energy passed harmlessly through empty space. The human vessels, if that's what they were, had moved instantaneously without acceleration or trajectory. And then the humans attacked. Later, survivors would struggle to describe exactly what happened next. It wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was surgical, methodical, almost elegant in its precision. Thousands of small objects, each no larger than a personal transport, swarmed around the Kthrak vessels. Where typical combat in space involved exchanges of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles across vast distances, this was intimate, coordinated chaos. The human drones, for lack of a better term, attached themselves to specific points on the Kthrak ships. There were few explosions, little of the spectacular destruction typically associated with space combat. Instead, Frack ships simply ceased functioning. Weapons systems went silent. Engines died. Communications stopped. Some vessels drifted lifelessly. Others executed bizarre maneuvers, spinning or accelerating briefly before shutting down completely. On the tactical display in the Lythari Command Center, the symbols representing Kthrak ships weren't disappearing. They were changing status from combat-capable to neutralized at a rate that seemed impossible. "They're not destroying them," whispered General Kirix, his earlier skepticism forgotten as he watched in awe. "They're disabling them. Perfectly. Systematically." Where the Kthrak resistance was heaviest, different tactics emerged. Pinpoint energy weapons fired from human platforms vaporized key components of Kthrak vessels. Power cores, command centers, weapon emplacements, while leaving the rest of the massive ships intact. In a few cases, something resembling traditional space combat occurred, with Kthrak ships simply ceasing to exist in brilliant flashes of light. On the ground, the pattern was similar. Kthrak ground forces found their armor suddenly inoperable, their weapons powerless. Towering war machines toppled as their gyroscopic systems failed. Communication networks dissolved into static. And through it all, not a single human voice was heard on any communication channel. No demands for surrender. No triumphant declarations. No communication at all. Just relentless, silent efficiency. Time elapsed since first human contact with Kthrak forces, Elara requested, her voice barely audible over the stunned silence in the command center. 2 hours and 17 minutes, Commander, came the reply. 2 hours. In 2 hours, the humans had accomplished what the combined forces of the Lythari and their former allies couldn't achieve in 7 years of brutal warfare. By the 3rd hour, it was over. The largest Kthrak vessels had been systematically stripped of offensive capabilities. Smaller craft were herded into containment areas surrounded by human drones. Ground forces were immobilized, their biomechanical systems rendered inert by technologies the Lythari couldn't begin to comprehend. The sky above Xylos, for the first time in years, was quiet. No bombardment. No screaming engines of Kthrak dropships. Just silence and the gentle drift of disabled enemy vessels being towed into stable orbits by small human craft. "Commander," the communications officer called, breaking the trance that had fallen over the command center. "Incoming transmission. It's the human ambassador." Elara took a deep breath, composing herself before nodding. The holographic image of Ambassador Lee appeared once more, still seated at the same desk, looking as calm and composed as during their first interaction. If the ambassador had been coordinating a system-wide military operation of unprecedented scale, nothing in their demeanor suggested it. "Commander Voss," Lee greeted her with a small nod. "The Kthrak forces have been neutralized. Their capacity to cause further harm to your people has been eliminated." Elara struggled to find words appropriate for the moment. "Ambassador, we are eternally grateful. What you've accomplished is nothing short of miraculous." Lee acknowledged this with a slight inclination of their head. "No miracle, Commander. Simply applied technology and tactics suited to the situation." "Your forces," Elara began, then reconsidered her question. "May I ask what will happen to the surviving Kthrak?" "They're being processed now," Lee replied. "Their leadership structure is being dismantled. Their ships will be rendered permanently non-functional for military purposes, but left with sufficient systems for basic transit. They will be escorted from this sector with a clear understanding that return will result in consequences more severe than what they experience today." The clinical precision in Lee's tone sent a shiver down Elara's spine. There was no bloodlust or vengeance in the human's voice, just the calm efficiency that had characterized their entire intervention. "We will be dispatching humanitarian and reconstruction teams to your planetary surface within the next 6 hours, Lee continued. "They will provide medical assistance, food supplies, and technical expertise to restore critical infrastructure." "Ambassador," Elder Talone spoke up, stepping into view of the transmission. "While we are profoundly thankful, we must ask, what do you desire in return for this assistance? No act of such magnitude comes without expectation." For the first time, something like emotion flickered across Lee's features, a momentary softening around the eyes, perhaps sadness or understanding. Elder, we do not require immediate compensation, Lee said gently. Humanity has learned through bitter experience that allowing expansionist powers like the Kthrak to operate unchallenged eventually threatens everyone. Our intervention serves our long-term interests as much as it serves your immediate survival. Nevertheless, Lee continued, we would welcome cultural exchange and diplomatic relations once your society has had time to stabilize. There is much we could learn from one another. Alara noticed that Lee had not mentioned the Novolith deposits, the rare resource that had drawn the Kthrak to Xylos in the first place. Either the humans were being exceptionally tactful, or they genuinely had no immediate interest in the material that had nearly cost the Lythari their civilization. Of course, Elder Talon agreed, bowing his head slightly. The Lythari will never forget what humanity has done for us today. Our peoples are bound by this act, and we embrace the opportunity for friendship between our species. There's one more thing, Lee added, expression growing more serious. During our operation, we detected Kthrak communication signals being transmitted toward the core of their empire. We believe they have called for reinforcements. While today's battle is over, the larger conflict may not be. A cold weight settled in Alara's stomach. After the miracle of the last few hours, the thought of facing more Kthrak forces was unbearable. But you need not fear, Lee continued, apparently noting her distress. Earth has determined that the Kthrak expansion represents a strategic threat to galactic stability. We will be extending our defense perimeter to include the Xylos system and surrounding sectors. Should the Kthrak return in force, they will find not just their previous enemy awaiting them, but humanity as well. The implications were staggering. Not just rescue, but ongoing protection. Not just a single intervention, but a fundamental shift in the power dynamics of their region of space. Ambassador, Alara said, finding her voice again. I don't understand. Until today, we had no confirmation that humanity even existed as more than a theoretical species. Now you arrive with technology centuries beyond our understanding, defeat our most feared enemy in ours, and offer continued protection. Why reveal yourselves now? Why not sooner? Why not to others? Lee's expression remained impassive, but there was a weight to their next words. Commander, humanity has observed the wider galaxy for longer than you might imagine, but we have chosen careful isolation for our own reasons. Your situation presented a clear moral imperative that overcame our traditional caution. As for why not sooner? Lee paused briefly. We have learned that timing matters in these interventions. Too soon, and species may become dependent. Too late, and all is lost. The ambassador leaned forward slightly. You fought bravely for 7 years. You proved your resilience and determination. Now we can help you rebuild without compromising who you are as a people. The transmission concluded shortly afterward with arrangements for coordination between human relief forces and Lythari authorities. As the hologram faded, the command center remained silent, each person processing the monumental shift in their reality. 7 years of war ended in 3 hours, General Kirix murmured, staring at the tactical display where Kthrak vessels now registered as neutralized threats. If they had this capability, they must have been watching us struggle all this time. Watching us die. We don't know that, Alara replied, though the same thought had occurred to her. And we can't know their reasons. What matters is that they came when we called. And if they hadn't, another officer asked bitterly, how many died waiting for us to find this miracle solution? Elder Talon raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. What's done is done. We faced extinction, and now we face tomorrow. That is enough. Hours later, as the first human relief ships began landing at designated coordinates, Alara stood at a viewport in the upper level of the command bunker, watching the sky. Debris from disabled Kthrak ships glittered like strange stars among the real ones now visible through the clearing atmosphere. Occasionally, small human vessels darted among them, their movements impossibly precise. She thought of Ambassador Lee's words about timing and dependency. Had humanity calculated this intervention not just militarily, but psychologically? Waiting until the Lythari were broken enough to accept help unconditionally, but not so broken they couldn't rebuild? The door behind her slid open, and a junior officer entered, coming to attention. Commander, the first human medical teams have arrived at Central Medical. They're requesting coordination with our chief physicians. Granted, Alara said absently, still gazing at the sky. And their other teams? Engineering crews are already working on power restoration in the southern continent. They brought materials we've never seen before. Some kind of self-assembling infrastructure. Alara nodded. Of course they had. The same species that could disable a warship without destroying it could probably build a city from nothing in days. Commander, the officer hesitated. The humans? They look like us. I mean, not exactly, but they have 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. They're so much smaller and frilier looking than the history suggested. How could they defeat the Kthrak so easily when we couldn't? Alara turned from the viewport to face the young officer. Because warfare isn't about bodies or even courage. It's about ideas. Somewhere in their development, humans took a different path than the Kthrak did. We built bigger ships, stronger weapons, tougher defenses, all variations on the same concepts. They thought differently. She looked back to the sky, where the first stars of evening were appearing. And now we have to learn to think differently, too. About them, about ourselves, about what comes next. The officer saluted and departed, leaving Alara alone with her thoughts. In the distance, the lights of the capital city began coming on, section by section, as human engineering teams restored power grids. Small points of brightness in the darkness, like hope returning after a long absence. 7 years of war, millions dead, a civilization nearly erased, and then salvation, arriving suddenly from a species they hadn't known existed in any meaningful way. Alara checked the timepiece on her wrist. Just over 12 hours since their first contact with humanity. Just over 3 hours since the fighting ended. A lifetime ago, the beginning of something new. She touched her hand to the viewport, feeling the cool surface against her palm, and made a silent promise to her dead, family, friends, comrades, that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. The Lythari would rebuild. They would learn. They would remember both the darkness of these years and the blinding efficiency with which it had been banished. And they would never look at the stars quite the same way again, knowing what waited out there among them. Not just threats like the Kthrak, but powers like humanity, watching, waiting, calculating their moment to step from shadow into history. 3 hours to end a 7-year war. What else could they accomplish if they chose? And what would it mean for the galaxy when they decided to fully emerge from their isolation? Questions for tomorrow. Tonight, for the first time in 7 years, Commander Alara Voss would sleep without the sound of distant bombardment, without the weight of imminent extinction. Tonight, her people would begin to remember what peace felt like. And somewhere, on a world she had never seen, Ambassador Janley was perhaps reporting to their superiors that the operation had been successfully completed. A footnote in humanity's hidden history. A turning point in hers.